So I recently got back from America. I did this amazing trip from west to east and back to the west again. More than 10,000 miles in my Corvette. And you know, I've been driving here in China for about 7 years now. And it was like a breath of fresh air. I'm not gonna lie, when I say driving 1,000 miles is equal to driving about 50 miles here in China, I feel just the same. So after that 1,000-mile journey, I'll get out of the car and I'll feel worn out and tired. And it's the same way I feel after driving 50 miles in mainland China. And that is because driving in China is one of the most stressful experiences you'll ever have. Now, I'm moaning about driving a car, and yes, driving a car in China is a chore. But there's one thing about China that I haven't mentioned, and that is you do not need a car. In fact, there's no reliance on cars like there are in other countries. I know it's different in Europe, but where I'm from in South Africa and America, where I visited, Australia, New Zealand, you name it, any of these countries, you actually need a car. If you want to travel around, even if you just want to go to the shops, you need a car or a motorcycle, because often you live very far away from, you know, where all the action is. And that's something that China has most of the world beat, and that is public transport. I mean, not only is it cheap, but it's so well set up, and the infrastructure for public transport is absolutely amazing. It'll blow your mind. Metro systems are popping up in all the major cities. Shenzhen, where I live, has got one of the best metro systems in the world, and all over China you get really good metro systems. High-speed rails, second to none in the world. Honestly, the high-speed rail network is expanding exponentially every year here in China, and you can literally just hop on a train and be in another city in a matter of hours. And every year, new cities open up high-speed rail stations, and it's pretty amazing. Not only that, you've got long-distance buses, or coaches as some people like to call them, which are cheap again, and they service most cities. Of course, not always the safest form of transport, but they're there. And another thing I have to mention is the fact that taxis are some of the cheapest taxis in the world. However, of course, you're going to have to speak Chinese if you want to use a taxi here. So basically, although driving a car is abysmal and terrible and a very awful experience here, it's more than made up for the fact that you've got incredible public transport here in China. Not only that, you can actually walk to most places.
Now, one of the stupidest things that I actually did was buy a ridiculously fast car. Now, coming from America, I always thought that driving was not only a pleasure, but something that is necessary to get around. And when you come to China, you can't have that kind of ideal. Now, the problem is, for someone that actually enjoys driving, when you come to China, you will actually be living in your nightmare, because if you have any sort of passion for driving, you're gonna get caught up in so much traffic that you'll never actually be able to enjoy it. So, like I said, one of the stupidest things I ever did was buy a really powerful car, because I might as well have gotten a scooter. There's absolutely no reason to have a car here in China, and that can be disappointing for a lot of people. Probably the most distressing thing about traffic in China is actually the danger of it all. China has the highest fatality rate in terms of traffic across the entire world. It's actually 20% higher than India, where you'd think is much more hectic. I mean, I've seen videos, Winston's been to India, I've seen videos of India where it looks like you're guaranteed instant death if you drive there. But actually, like I said, China's 20% higher than that, and that's distressing in itself, because if you're a pedestrian or you're on a motorcycle, like me and Winston are on ADVChina usually, it is one of the most dangerous things you can do, because people don't care about you on the road. People actually consider you a lower class citizen. They'll cut you off, and it's just all in all a very, very terrifying experience. Now, when you first step off the plane and get into China, you're gonna think that you went into some sort of post-apocalyptic land with no law. But it's not quite so simple. I mean, a lot of people get in their cars and they drive like there's no road rules. And that's absolutely the case. And if you walk on the sidewalk, sometimes you'll see e-bikes and motorcycles kind of riding up along next to you and almost taking you out in the process. But if you get into a car, or you have your own vehicle or e-bike or motorcycle, you'll get to enjoy those freedoms as well. And although it seems very, very dangerous, Chinese traffic's actually quite slow. And I don't see people like back in America that would be driving 150 miles an hour down the highway, having these street races and going 100 miles an hour in the middle of the city. I don't see that so much in China. What I do see is people driving very erratically, but deliberately slow. There's not a whole lot of injuries that can happen in the traffic accidents here in the city. And although you might pick up some bad habits in the process of, the way kind of locals drive here, it's somewhat freeing to be able to know that you can kind of do whatever you want on the road. Another interesting point is actually in China, the police aren't allowed to chase you. So I know kind of when you see these like red and blue lights in America, you know that you're kind of screwed. And basically what will happen is the cop will kind of pull you over on the highway and you're almost guaranteed to get a ticket. But here they set up checkpoints and cameras. So basically if you follow the rules in between cameras, you can pretty much do whatever you want.
Now, I was actually kind of taken aback when I first got here by the traffic. Not only is it chaotic and people drive in a very selfish fashion, but it's so bad that emergency vehicles are not ever allowed through. People are actually so inconsiderate when they drive here that if you have an ambulance or a fire engine, they will actually actively try to cut them off just because they don't want the fire engine or the ambulance to get in their way, as you can see in the following footage.
Oh, they go that way?
Yeah. Now, I actually tried to go to the IKEA the other day, and because there's a bit of a bottleneck in the road, people were trying to cram in there and doing all sorts of crazy things. They didn't seem to realize that if they were just polite and allowed people to merge, everything would be smooth. But in fact, it got so bad that a massive big fire had broken out somewhere. You had all these fire engines, and these fire engines couldn't actually even get through. The firemen had to jump out of the fire engines and actually go and smack the cars on their bonnets and try to force them to move back just so that they could get through to get to the fire that they had to go and extinguish. And I've seen it with ambulances. I've seen ambulances who obviously have sick people inside who need emergency treatment being blocked by traffic, and it's so frustrating and infuriating. Now, if you compare this to the US, and not only the US, South Africa, Australia, any kind of Western country, there are laws in place that prevent you from blocking emergency vehicles. If you block emergency vehicles in those countries, you can go to jail or at least face massive fines because you're putting other people's lives in danger. But here in China, it's kind of like well, I don't care if it's an emergency vehicle, I'm more important, my car is more important, my life is more important, me, and so they block them, and it's so frustrating. And you will only ever understand if you come and drive here in China, because don't care what you say, you could tell me anything you want about different cultures, but this is pure selfishness incarnate. China is actually very, very far ahead of the rest of the world when it comes to electronic vehicles, things like e-bikes. And this is actually kind of because they've banned motorcycles in a lot of the big cities. Delivery guys and the average commuter, they don't really have a choice, so they've had to choose other forms of transport. So a huge explosion in electronic bicycles kind of erupted all over the country. Not only e-bikes, but things like solo wheels, hoverboards, any kind of small electronic form of transport, little electronic scooters, those those little scooters that you stand on. And of course, little foldable e-bikes like the one I have. And this is a very positive thing, I think, because first of all, it's better for the environment, to use an electronic form of transport. And I know the argument that yes, the electricity has to be generated somewhere and it's probably being generated at a coal-burning plant. But that aside, the fact that they're actually putting it to the test and showing that it is actually viable to move a whole population around a city on electronic vehicles is great. Not only these little e-bikes which you see everywhere, but also electronic taxis, electronic buses, like fully electric buses. They're being pioneered in all the big cities here in China. So we get to see, the potential in the future for other countries. They can take note and perhaps just implement it in a little bit of a better way, but at the same time, they can see that it is possible to go environmentally friendly. So, Seamilk, is there anything you'd like to say to everybody before we sign off?
Well, whether you like to ride a bicycle, ride a motorcycle like us, drive a car, take public transportation, or even fly in the sky, I hope you remember to like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, and whether or not you're one of those guys who just likes to float by life, sitting, commuting every day on the public transport, or somebody who likes to take control of your own destiny and actually drive or ride wherever you're going, we love you all the same. You know the drill, guys. Always stay awesome.
When I close my eyes, I can almost see it. When I take a breath, you fill up my lungs.